What is the most terrifying thing that happened during a Zoom call? Story 1. I teach, and I prefer cameras on for the younger classes so I can see if they're paying attention. But mics on only when it's your turn to talk and cameras optional for teenagers. I had a good student not responding to questions when she would usually be full of good ideas. And it turned out her grandmother was having a meltdown caused by dementia, and the student was home alone with her trying to reach her parents and avoid calling the police. One of her parents was in the room with me, we were team teaching from on campus, and was pulled aside to go deal with the crisis, which was how I found out. I was teaching a professional development workshop on best practices for online courses, and shared the story as an example of exactly why cameras and microphones should be optional. You don't know what's happening in the background and why the student isn't responding. Story 2. Blind kid in a Zoom class at the end of the year during English. I see out of the corner of my eye he is the only one with a camera on. Teacher was chill if we didn't want them on while online. Starts stroking his soldier in front of half of the class and the teacher. Teacher kicked him from the class without saying anything and continued on with the lecture like nothing happened. Poor guy probably didn't even know, but yeah, that was a very jarring English class. What was even going on in the English class to get the guy in the mood? Like, were you studying 50 Shades of Grey? What was happening? I need some explanation here. Although I guess people have spanked the monkey in math classes too from other stories I've read, so I guess. It doesn't take a lot for some people. Story 3. Multiple shots being fired at the apartment across from me. I was on my weekly team call when it happened, and I was asking a question so I was unmuted. And I went, holy crap, those are gunshots, and hit the floor. All my team saw was me throwing my headset off and frantically rolling off my couch. Supposedly, my mic picked up me calling 911. Don't get involved with drugs, everyone. There's a chance people will come by and try to shoot you in the middle of the day. Story 4. I have two, not terrifying, but one weird and one NSFW. 1. Right after lockdown, when everyone was forced into using Zoom meetings, a guy used one of those background images. Well, he was wearing a black turtleneck and the whole time he looked like a disembodied head floating in outer space. 2. I personally have an oversized monitor so I can see even the small little faces very well on Zoom. Guy was in a shirt and tie and all seemed normal, but he kept making some very unusual facial expressions, and at one point actually clamped his hand over his mouth. Then, suddenly and very briefly, the back of a woman's head popped up. Most people tried to pretend they didn't see anything, but there was one guy who kept asking whose head that was, and why were they listening to our meeting, and just on and on. People became more annoyed by the guy asking questions than about what they had seen. Why was the guy that hell-bent on finding out who it was because of that? Like, was this guy completely oblivious? Were they just all business? Because I kind of respect that too. Either way, it would definitely get annoying. Like, no, Jeremy, I don't think a competitor just gave head to one of your team members. I don't think that was what was happening there. Story 5. 2 years ago, when everyone was still getting used to working from home, I had my desk set up with a window directly behind me. One day I had the blinds cracked but not completely shut, but also no other lights were turned on in the room. Come to my part in the meeting and I'm talking about something or other and one girl on my team just starts laughing hysterically. I hadn't noticed the wall/window was completely illuminated and my face was completely blacked out beyond all recognition due to the shadows. I also have a naturally deep voice. She apologized and said she couldn't help it because it looked like someone from a true crime documentary trying to hide their identity. I got a laugh out of it as well. Story 6. A personal social nightmare. During a discussion-heavy class I was taking last year, I had a question that turned into a 2 to 3 minute back and forth with the teacher as they expounded on my question. Just when they were redirecting the convo back to their slides, one of the girls in the class wasn't on mute and someone enters their room. I guess their roommate or something said, "That guy has such an annoying voice." And the girl responded, "I hate hearing him talk. Every time he opens his mouth, I'm just waiting for him to shut up." Teacher reminded everyone to mute themselves, and the girl got wide-eyed and muted. We could see her tell her roommate about it and then laughing, but they didn't apologize or anything. There was just a few moments of silence, and then the teacher moved on. I stepped away from my computer for a bit and barely ever said anything for the rest of the semester. If this story taught me anything, it's that I need more variety in my female voices. I feel like I did basically the same voice twice. Anyway, yes, just make sure you're muted. You can obviously tell who has spent time in Discord or Skype before and who hasn't. Story 8. Zoom interview for a very well-paying admin position at my local hospital. Lots of money on the line. Was doing the interview while my daughter was at school, and husband walks into the room saying, "Well, would you look at the time? Time to suck my wife's nose." He said this while naked and visible to the camera. Interviewer laughed. I was mortified, and a conversation discussing onboarding became an employer ghosting me. Rest in peace. For what it's worth, I don't actually see that ever changing the outcome of an interview, because people in the background are gonna do whatever, you never know. I don't think at any point the employer was like, this candidate was great, she just ticked all the boxes. But then her husband said that he was gonna suck her nose, so we can't have that. Story 9. Not Zoom, but back in the old TeamSpeak days, we were all in a call and a couple of our guild were from South Africa. All of a sudden, there's all this shouting and a noise coming from one of their mics. It's muffled, but you can clearly hear stuff like, "Who the hell are you?" and "Get out," followed by 2 gunshots and silence. He was just left there in TeamSpeak. We're all shouting, and the other guy from South Africa doesn't know the other guy's full real name or where he lives, so we're all powerless. Just this ghost sat in TeamSpeak. By the following morning, he had disconnected, and we heard nothing about it for a week. He eventually just appeared online one day and told us how he'd been broken into. They'd unalived his 2 guard dogs, and the gunshots were just into the ceiling to make him compliant. The worst part was he told us it wasn't the first time it had happened, and gave the other South African guy his details in case it ever happened again, just so if it did, we could call the police at least. Now this is truly a terrifying thing that's happened. This is one of the first ones to actually fit the question, and it hits hard. That would have been a terrifying, mortifying, traumatizing week for me before he reconnected. Glad he's alright in the end, though. Story 10. At a company I worked for, in a Zoom meeting with a data center the CEO was talking to because they were thinking of purchasing it, a bank of industrial UPSs caught on fire and the fire suppression systems began going off. For reference, they had a system that worked in this order. 1. Chemical extinguisher. 2. A chemical that removes all oxygen from the room. 3. Water. 1 failed, and the dude who was in the room was out the door only seconds before 2 went off. Barely made it. Shouldn't have stopped to try to put out the fire. They did not buy the DC, but they hired the tech. Story 11. Not Zoom, as this was pre-Zoom in the early 2000s. Anyhow, back in the day, a friend of mine since I was 12, we were both in our early 20s at the time, died while in a video chat group online. This group of people watched him overdose on camera, egging him on, and then couldn't figure out how to contact anyone once he passed out. His mother found him dead the next morning. He taught me so many things, and because my mother was afraid I would be kidnapped if alone, as a teenage girl, my platonic friendship with him gave me freedom that I never had before. If he was with me, I could leave the small suburban street I lived on, I could go to the park, bike to the 7-Eleven for a Slurpee, go play some hoops, shoot his potato cannon. He got sucked in by drugs, and had 1 rehab attempt under his belt when his mental health and addiction collided with the aid of peer pressure to result in this. I saw the chat. The people egging him on were just horrid. I wish he had the chance to pull himself out, as I feel like he was just 1 relapse away from redemption. He was so tech-savvy and quick to learn. He could have done so much in the world. Rest in peace. Story 12. This story happened to me on my 2nd day of training on my first job ever. So I just graduated in June 2021 and found a job in October of 2021. I used to use Zoom for all my university classes, but for work, they used Microsoft Teams, so I'm not familiar with that at all. On my 2nd day of training, we have an important meeting with the vice president of the company. The vice president keeps babbling about things that I don't understand because it's my 2nd day. So I'm just screwing around and I right-click him. I see 3 options, I think: mute, spotlight, and pin. So I'm like, mute? That sounds impossible. How can a person who is on their 2nd day of training be able to mute somebody, let alone the vice president? So I think about it for a bit and go, oh, it would definitely only mute it on my side. So I clicked mute. It works. I muted the guy from my side. I tried to right-click and look for unmute, but it didn't work. And then a couple of seconds later, I hear people typing in the chat and also speaking up, "Hey, Vice President, we can't hear you." So he unmutes himself and says, "Somebody just muted me." Oh, that's hilarious. At this point, my heart is beating hella fast, and this meeting had 150 plus people in it. I typed in the chat, "Sorry, didn't mean to do that," and then tried to unmute myself to apologize, but it took some seconds to register. And then when I told my coworkers, yeah, I definitely didn't mean to mute him, I see to my horror that the unmute button worked, and everyone heard me say that. Vice President then jokingly told me, "You should have muted yourself, not me." Overall, he took it pretty well and is a super laid-back person, but man, that was terrifying. I thought I was fired for sure. Story 13. Not terrifying, but real secondhand embarrassment. We were on a Zoom conference call with our marketing agency. We were their biggest client by a mile, but our relationship had become strained as they weren't delivering results. The purpose of the meeting was for them to A, introduce our new account director, and B, to present the results and action plan back to us. Our marketing manager, ironically called Karen, was giving them a real hard time. The new account director shared her screen. but inadvertently shared her Slack on the screen where her and their whole team were chatting crap about us in real time as they were presenting. This included calling Karen a real Karen, and I bet she'll ask to speak to the manager, and saying that they'll have to stop lying to us soon. Karen let them keep it up on the screen the whole time and told them at the end. The account director cried. Story 14. Was on Discord with friends and hopped into a work call early. I forgot I switched calls and walked away from my desk with my headset on to go get a snack before the meeting. Someone said, "Hey, IRL name." Thinking it's a gaming friend, I blurt out, "What the hell? Since when do you call me my IRL name?" Was not a gaming friend. Was the CEO. I work for a startup, so luckily I have a decent relationship with him. I realized my mistake a second later and mentioned that I'd been sitting in a call with friends while working today and apologized. Luckily, he laughed it off with me and never brought it up again. Story 15. Teacher demanded we stay in view with the camera on. I had to use the bathroom. Teacher said, "No, I can't leave camera view." So I said, "Fine then." And I took the computer to the bathroom and was crapping on camera. Only the upper half of me was visible, so nothing inappropriate. I did leave the mic on though, as per class policy. The class was all dudes and I was basically famous for a day. Teacher never spoke about it again, but now allowed us to leave for bathroom breaks. Another one was where I needed to shave my beard, and same situation but different teacher. So I shaved my beard on screen. High school was a crazy time. Story 16. Last year, a student of mine logged on and told me her mom's boyfriend hit her mommy, and her mommy was sleeping in the bathtub and wouldn't get up. She said she was scared and had her toddler sister with her under her bed. I stayed really calm and told her I was going to help. The other kids started joining. I told her to stay on, no matter what I said to everyone else. I grabbed my phone and started texting my boss and every other person in our school. Another teacher who I'm close with ran into my classroom. She was a champ and started reading to the kids. We called the police, sent them to the address on file. They were not at the address listed in our contact information. Another parent gets on and is telling me to mute the girl. She isn't supposed to have a sibling in Zoom. The toddler was crying. More people in my classroom are trying to help. I tell everyone but this kid to log off. She's in kindergarten, can't really read yet. Started begging me to not end the Zoom while trying to calm her sister. This other mother is being a jerk. She's telling me how long I'm legally supposed to Zoom and all this crap. The principal steps on screen and tells her really nastily to read the room, ma'am. Get off. Everyone but the first kid and one other student log off. He's this really kind boy. I tell him I need him to go. Other student is asking over and over, "Not me, right? I want to stay on, I'm scared." He starts comforting her. We are frantic. We start asking her where she is, can she get to a phone, what does the house look like, all that stuff. Officer shows up at our school. We call DHR. We hear a man yelling at my student to quiet the baby. I felt complete horror and dismay and helpless. The officer who came to our school, small town, knows the family, and might have an idea where they are. He sprints out after talking to her and asking her mother's name. We keep trying to comfort her, but she's upset. Like an idiot, I had set my Zoom for 45 minutes and the time was coming to an end. I tell her I'm going to send her another link, but it cuts off. Every teacher and administrator is now in my class. We all feel helpless, same questions from everyone over and over. Just a couple minutes later, we get word that the cops have found her. I fall on my knees and I start to cry. Boyfriend had in fact beat mother and he was arrested. Mother was, and as far as I know, is in the throes of addiction. Little girl and little sister live with grandparents in another state now. I cannot express how happy I am that this story had a happy ending. And I know this is kind of aside from the point, but props to OP for the writing of this. It really felt like a thriller story. But I know that just comes from OP's true, genuine terror from when this happened. What a horrible situation. I hope that everyone is doing better, except for the boyfriend. Although I will say if the boyfriend managed to clean up his act and is no longer, I don't know, a woman beater, I guess that would be good too. Story 17. I was in online class and playing Brawl Stars. I was in science class and my teacher was presenting something. I clicked the button to zoom into the presentation. When she was done, I was zoned out and clicked the unmute button instead of the zoom out button by accident. I said something about someone teleporting away and she was like, "Please get off of whatever game you're playing and don't get back on until after school." She was really nice about it, but to this day, I have never used my phone in class. Story 18. My sister had a massive Zoom call for her wedding because the venue limited guests to 100 during COVID. There were dozens of friends and family on the call, and I was walking around with the laptop engaging with the people in attendance to make the Zoomers feel as integrated into the festivities as possible. The meeting wasn't password protected. Some trolls managed to find the room and started playing adult content for everyone. That was interesting. Took me quite a while to track down the lady who had another laptop and was actually hosting the meeting, but not paying any attention to it. Hey, at least you can say that marriage started with a bang, am I right? No? Fair enough. Story 19. My professor was teaching and she says, "Hey guys, this might sound weird," then passed out and completely fell back. It was really scary, but a few seconds later her husband came and was like, oh god, sees the Zoom class is canceled, ends the meeting. She emailed later saying that she easily passes out and it's never happened while teaching before. Great professor and a very kind-hearted person. Story 20. Not terrifying from the outside perspective, but it freaked the soul out of my body. It was senior year of college during COVID year. I was living on campus. My girlfriend H was a commuter student. Both of our classes were online, so she would come to campus every day and we would join our respective Zoom classes while sitting together and cuddling. We were sitting in the Divinity School kitchen, ironic, I know, while I was in a Zoom call with my camera and mic turned off. The kitchen was empty, so as things go by, we start making out. We've been making out pretty intensely for a while until I hear the professor call my name fairly loudly in the call. I froze and could literally feel my soul ascend from this mortal shell. Then I slowly turned to my screen. Turns out my mic and camera were still turned off, but the class was over, and the professor said he would stay back to take questions. Since I was the only person left in the call, he thought I stayed back to ask questions personally, and that's why he was calling out my name. Okay, but respectfully, why show up for the Zoom class if you're not going to pay any attention at all? Because clearly if you didn't even notice the class and you were checked out, you had other business, I get it, but like, why be there? Story 21. Way before Zoom, but on a WebEx call. For those unaware, WebEx doesn't, or didn't at the time, let you know who leaves the call. You hear a beep sound when someone leaves, but if multiple people leave at the same time, you would never know who, unless those remaining continued talking. Needless to say, the client contact asks for certain people to stay on. Her fault, as it totally could have been a private phone call. Client contact proceeds to crap on absolutely everyone who left. Little did they know, a couple of colleagues stayed on and recorded the entire 20-minute tirade. It was awful. I was kicking butt, working overtime, crossing my T's and dotting my I's, and the crap I heard about me made me question my ability. Cool leader, but I never saw that person in the same light again. Made them work harder to get stuff from me. Story 22. I was on a Zoom call for work right after the pandemic started. My wife and I were both working from home and the schools and daycares were closed too. Normally, we divided up our day so that one of us was working and the other was taking care of the kids. One day, though, we both had online meetings at the same time, so we turned on the TV and told the kids to just watch TV until one of us was done. I had my headphones on so that I wouldn't be distracted from my meeting, and at some point I see my wife quickly get up from her chair. Then when I looked at my screen at the window where I could see myself, I saw my 3-year-old behind me frantically clawing at her throat and trying to cough. She was choking on whatever snack she had been eating. My wife was too panicked to really do anything and was just screaming and basically pulling her hair out. I hopped up, leaned the kiddo forward, and just started smacking her on the back. Luckily, she coughed it up, started crying, and I gave her a big hug. A minute or two later, I sat back down to my meeting, put on my headphones, and then realized everyone else in the meeting was just sitting there in shock because they had witnessed the whole thing. Story 23. Not for me, but for my professor. This was when Zoom classes were starting to become common. School policy was we had to have our cameras on or else it's counted as an absence. Professor's making us do an assignment, so we're all writing. I look up for a second and see the top of everyone's head except for like one other person. That's when my professor's husband enters her room in nothing but tidy whities. She notices and they both freak out. The other student and I were the only ones to notice. Okay, but why is your professor's husband coming in when she's teaching a class at all, let alone what he's wearing? Surely he should know if she is teaching a class currently. And I would assume the professor doesn't want to be disturbed while teaching said class, regardless of if the class can see him or not, but whatever, I guess. Guy had something pressing to deal with, I suppose. Anyway, we really ran the full gamut here. We had some truly terrifying things, we had some funny things, and we had some in between. A good spread if I say so myself. But that is all the time we have for today, so I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you in the next one.